The NTSB preliminary report is out on the Cessna 340A that struck the Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star jet trainer mounted on a pole just 3,300 feet short of runway 13 from Oklahoma's Muskogee Davis Airport. There were 5 people on board the 340, 0 fatalities, and this appears to be another simple case of fuel exhaustion. Let's check it out. My name's Juan Brown, you're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel, and this video is brought to you by the folks that sponsor this channel here on Patreon. This accident occurred back on Wednesday, the 27th of November, just after midnight local time. The pilot sustained serious injuries and 4 passengers sustained minor injuries. The flight was operated as an FAR Part 91 general aviation flight, and it was a long cross-country from Livingston, Montana to Muskogee Field, Oklahoma, a nearly 4-hour-long cross-country flight in the Cessna 340A. The pilot reported the purpose of the personal cross-country flight was to visit family. Prior to departure, he reported that the airplane was topped off with 100-octane fuel, which is the correct fuel for that aircraft. A preliminary review of the NTSB data showed the airplane departed Montana at about 1840 on November 26, and the airplane traveled nonstop via an IFR flight plan to its intended destination of Muskogee, Oklahoma. Before arriving to Muskogee, the air traffic controller cleared the airplane for a visual approach to runway 13. That's the straight-in approach. We'll take a look at the NTSB data here in a moment. Shortly after, the pilot reported a loss of engine power occurred with both engines. Generally, in a twin-engine aircraft, if you're losing power in both engines at the same time, it's usually fuel-related. The pilot attempted to restart both engines, but to no avail. During the forced landing, the right wing impacted a permanent static display on the airport property, that's the Lockheed T-33 jet trainer, and the static display is located about 3,300 feet northwest of the approach end of runway 13. So here's the NTSB data from NTSB Exchange. We see the aircraft departing at about 1:48 Z time out of Montana and proceeding pretty direct right for the straight-in runway 13 in Muskogee, crashing at about 6:06 Z time, a time of 4 hours and 18 minutes of total flight time. Switching to Google Maps, here's Muskogee, Oklahoma, located right on the shores of the Arkansas River. Here's runway 13 at the Muskogee Airport, and just off the end of the runway is the Oklahoma Army National Guard Recruiting Office. And just up the street at the intersection of Cherokee and East Davis Field Road, you see the T-33 trainer. If we pop down here, we can see the T-33 in its former glory mounted on a pole 3,300 feet short of the runway. And here we can measure that distance. Yep, about 3,300 feet. Now, sometimes I say he missed it by that much, but a sharp BLANCOLIRIO viewer said, no, he didn't miss it by just that much. He missed it by 45 minutes. Remember, at night, VFR, fuel reserves, you need to have 45 minutes of fuel reserves. And here he is running out of fuel 3,000 feet short of his destination. Now, I got to give credit where credit's due. Here on the Fox 23 News Report on YouTube, YouTuber Tony Williams says, there is a strong chance that this is the world's first mid-air collision of 2 fuel-burning aircraft where both aircraft were out of fuel. Here's a picture of 5757 Charlie in better days. A complicated pressurized twin-engine Cessna aircraft powered by the TSIO 520 engines, turbocharged engines, which allows you to pressurize the cabin, making it a great and comfortable cross-country machine if you respect the fuel limits. The weather at the time of the accident was clear and the winds were light. During the impact sequence, about half of the right wing of the 340 became separated and the empennage of the T-33 became separated. The airplane came to a rest in the flat field on airport property near the static display. The pilot and 4 passengers, 1 adult and 3 minor aged children, were able to egress from the airplane without further incident. The airplane sustained damage to the fuselage in the right wing, and the wreckage was recovered for further examination. Historical data indicates that the Cessna was originally delivered with 2 main tanks, 51 gallons total in each tank, 50 gallons usable in each tank, 2 ox fuel tanks, 32 gallons total, 31.5 gallons usable, and one left side locker fuel tank. That's usually mounted on the engine nacelle behind the engine. 20.5 gallons total, of which 20 gallons are usable. But the right side locker fuel tank was not installed in this particular application. So you got your 51-gallon main tanks located here on the wingtips, not all of which is usable, and your 32-gallon aux tanks located here in the wing. Just some basic pilot math. 51 times 2 equals 102. 32 times 2 is 64, if I'm correct. 64 plus 102. Pilot math here, tough stuff. 166 gallons. These TSO 520 engines will burn 18 to 22 gallons per hour, so let's just go 20 gallons per hour. He's at 19,000 feet, which is a good cruising altitude. 20 gallons per hour a piece times 2. 40 gallons per hour times 4 hours. 160 gallons. Not enough fuel if this is the configuration for this aircraft, and the NTSB will be able to determine that in the final report. And for 45 minutes of reserve fuel at night, times 40, you should have at least 30 gallons of fuel on board the aircraft by the time you land. Which means realistically, if you have this particular fuel setup on this particular airplane, your most reasonable flight range would be a 3.5-hour flight or a 3-hour and 15-minute flight at night to give you the 45-minute reserves. And if you're running into headwinds, you need to constantly update your fuel planning and land out at an alternate airport and pick up more fuel and carry on. But here at 19,000 feet, cruise along around 225, 230 knots, and it gets down to 210 knots. Maybe just a little bit of a headwind or a little less tailwind for this particular pilot on his way on in. With plenty of alternate airports to divert into to get the fuel needed to make it all the way to the destination. Now, oftentimes, pilots who can afford it will get enamored with the technology and get some form of fuel flow or fuel calculating device on board the airplane, but these devices are only as good as the operator. When you go to start your flight, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you do not get the correct input to these gauges before you start your flight, you're going to get wrong data output. You need to back it up with a simple watch and a pencil and a calculator. Basic aeronautical decision making takes down another general aviation aircraft. This family was very lucky to survive this, and that this aircraft did not cartwheel in after striking the T-33 on the pole. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.